Picture this. You are standing on a battlefield about to fight a war against your own family. Everything you have been trained for has led to this moment. And then, right before the violence starts, you freeze. You turn to your charioteer and say, "I cannot do this." What happens next is one of the most important conversations in human history. The Bhagavad Gita is a 700-verse dialogue between the warrior prince Arjuna and his charioteer Krishna, who is actually God in human form. It takes place on the field of Kurukshetra, moments before a massive civil war in ancient India. Arjuna sees his cousins, teachers, and friends on the opposing army. He drops his bow and refuses to fight. Krishna responds with 18 chapters of philosophy that have shaped Hindu thought, Indian culture, and millions of lives across the world for over 2,000 years. The Gita is part of a much longer epic called the Mahabharata, which is basically the war and peace of ancient India but about 8 times longer. But the Gita stands alone. You do not need the full epic to understand it. The battlefield setting is a framing device. What Krishna teaches Arjuna applies to anyone facing a difficult choice, a moral crisis, or the basic question of what you are supposed to do with your life. And that is why it is still one of the most widely read spiritual texts on the planet. The first thing Krishna tells Arjuna is that he has a duty, a dharma. Dharma is one of those Sanskrit words that does not translate cleanly. It means duty, righteousness, moral law, the role you are meant to play, all at once. Arjuna is a warrior. That is his dharma. His job is not to be a pacifist or a sage. His job is to fight when fighting is required. By refusing to do his duty because it is emotionally difficult, he is violating the structure of reality itself. This idea makes modern people uncomfortable because it sounds like it is justifying violence or saying you should just do what society tells you. That is not what Krishna means. Dharma is not obedience to arbitrary rules. It is alignment with your true nature and your genuine role in the situation you find yourself in. Arjuna is not being told to fight because authority said so. He is being told to fight because running away from his responsibility will create more suffering than facing it will. Think about the hard conversations you avoid, the difficult tasks you put off, the responsibilities you know are yours but you keep dodging because they are uncomfortable. That is what Krishna is addressing. He is not saying life should be easy or that you should enjoy every duty. He is saying that avoiding what is genuinely yours to do creates a different kind of suffering, the kind that comes from knowing you are not being who you actually are. We break down the great spiritual and philosophical texts of human history and show how they apply to real life. Links to translations, related videos, and book recommendations are below. The second major teaching is about detachment from results. Krishna tells Arjuna, you have a right to your actions, but never to the fruits of your actions. Do your duty with full effort and skill, but do not be attached to whether you win or lose. This is not apathy. It is psychological freedom. If your entire sense of self-worth depends on outcomes you cannot fully control, you are setting yourself up for constant anxiety. Here is a modern example. You work hard on a project. You do everything right, and then it fails anyway because of factors outside your control. If your happiness depended entirely on the project succeeding, you are now miserable. But if you can genuinely say, I did my best, the result is not entirely in my hands, you keep your equilibrium. That is what Krishna is teaching. Do the work, let go of the outcome. This principle is called Karma Yoga, the yoga of action. Yoga does not mean stretching in this context. It means union, discipline, a path. Karma Yoga is the practice of acting without being enslaved by the results. You pour yourself into the action, then you release your grip on what happens next. This is not easy. It goes against every instinct to secure and control outcomes. But Krishna says it is the only way to act powerfully without being crushed by anxiety. Krishna shifts the conversation to something even more fundamental. He tells Arjuna that the self, the true you, is not the body or the mind or the personality. It is something eternal and indestructible. The body can be killed, but the soul cannot. Weapons cannot cut it. Fire cannot burn it. Water cannot wet it. It simply is. And it has always been, and it will always be. This is the Hindu concept of Atman, the individual soul, which is ultimately identical with Brahman, the universal divine reality. Your deepest self is not separate from the ground of all existence. This is not just poetic language. It is meant to be experienced directly through meditation and self-inquiry. When you realize that the core of who you are is indestructible and eternal, the fear of death and loss loses much of its power. Now, you do not have to believe in reincarnation or the Hindu cosmology to get something useful out of this. The practical point is that you are not just your circumstances, your thoughts, or your temporary emotional states. There is something in you that witnesses all of those things without being identical to them. That witnessing awareness is what Krishna is pointing to, and learning to identify with that instead of with the constantly changing surface of your life, that changes everything. The Gita lays out 3 main paths to spiritual realization. The first is Karma Yoga, the path of selfless action, which we have already covered. The second is Jnana Yoga, the path of knowledge and discernment. This is the intellectual path. Through study, contemplation, and discrimination between the real and the unreal, you come to understand your true nature. The third is Bhakti Yoga, the path of devotion and love directed toward the divine. These are not mutually exclusive. Krishna presents them as complementary. Different people are suited to different paths based on their temperament. If you are naturally active and engaged with the world, Karma Yoga might resonate. If you are intellectual and analytical, Jnana Yoga. If you are emotional and relational, Bhakti Yoga. The Gita is remarkably flexible. It does not say there is only one right way. It says find the way that matches who you actually are. What is interesting about this is how practical it is. A lot of spiritual teachings say, meditate for 10 hours a day and renounce the world. The Gita says, no, if you are a householder, be an excellent householder. If you are a warrior, be an excellent warrior. Spirituality is not about escaping your life. It is about engaging with it so fully and selflessly that the ego dissolves in the process. That is a completely different approach. In one of the most powerful chapters, Krishna reveals his universal form to Arjuna. Arjuna sees Krishna not just as his charioteer but as the entirety of existence, all worlds, all beings, all times, past, present, and future, contained in one overwhelming vision. Arjuna is terrified and awed. He asks Krishna to return to his familiar human form because the vision is too much to bear. This chapter is about seeing the divine presence in everything, not as an abstract idea, but as a living reality. Every person you meet, every animal, every tree, every situation is an expression of the same underlying reality. When you begin to see this, your entire orientation changes. You stop dividing the world into sacred and profane. Everything becomes sacred, and that changes how you treat people, how you interact with nature, how you approach your daily tasks. You do not have to have a mystical vision to apply this. Just try the experiment. For one day, treat everyone you interact with as if they are sacred. Not because you are performing politeness, but because you are looking for the spark of the divine in them. See what that does to the quality of your interactions. The Gita says that shift in perception is not just nice, it is the shift that actually reflects reality correctly. Krishna teaches that the wise person remains calm in both pleasure and pain, success and failure, praise and blame. This is not emotional numbness, it is a deep stability that comes from being rooted in something beyond changing circumstances. The Gita calls this equanimity. You engage fully with life, but you do not get tossed around by its ups and downs. This is one of the most difficult teachings to actually embody. It is easy to stay calm when things are going well. It is harder when you lose something important or when someone treats you badly. Krishna is not saying suppress your emotions. He is saying do not let your emotions dictate your sense of self. You can feel grief without becoming grief. You can feel anger without becoming anger. There is a you underneath those waves that remain steady. Think about the last time something went wrong and you spiraled. Not just had a bad moment, but really spiraled into catastrophizing or rage. What the Gita is offering is an anchor point. Not so you never feel those things, but so you have something solid to return to when the storm passes. Equanimity is not about never being disturbed. It is about recovering your center faster each time. So how do you apply the Gita to your actual life? First, identify your Dharma. What is genuinely yours to do right now? Not what you wish you were doing, not what other people are doing, but what is actually in front of you that requires your attention and effort. It might be raising your kids, it might be finishing your degree, it might be something small and unglamorous. Do that thing as well as you can without being attached to recognition or immediate results. Second, practice detachment from outcomes in one specific area of your life. Pick something where you have been white-knuckling the result. Pour your effort into the process, then consciously release your grip on whether it works out the way you hope. This is not giving up. It is doing your best and then acknowledging that some things are not entirely in your control. Notice how that feels different from anxious attachment to a specific outcome. Third, experiment with the witnessing awareness Krishna describes. Sit quietly for 5 minutes and just notice your thoughts without getting caught up in them. Watch them arise and pass. Notice that the you who is watching is not the same as the thoughts being watched. This is not mystical, it is basic psychology. But when you experience it directly rather than just reading about it, it starts to shift how you relate to your own mind. The Bhagavad Gita has been interpreted 1,000 different ways. Gandhi used it to support non-violence, others have used it to justify violence. Some read it as literal theology. Others read it as pure psychology. This flexibility is not a bug, it is built into the text. Krishna gives Arjuna the framework, but Arjuna still has to choose. The Gita does not tell you what to do. It gives you a way of thinking about what you should do. It is also worth noting how many major figures have been influenced by the Gita. Thoreau read it at Walden Pond. Emerson loved it. Aldous Huxley wrote about it. Carl Jung analyzed it. Martin Luther King Jr. studied it. Robert Oppenheimer famously quoted it when he witnessed the first atomic bomb test. It has reached far beyond Hinduism into global consciousness because the questions it addresses are universal. One of the beautiful things about the text is that it meets you where you are. If you read it as a teenager, you might focus on the action and duty parts. If you read it in middle age, you might focus on the detachment and equanimity parts. If you read it facing grief or loss, the teachings on the eternal self might hit differently. The same 700 verses keep revealing new layers depending on what you bring to them. There are dozens of translations and they can feel very different from each other. Some are poetic and devotional. Some are scholarly and precise. Some try to make it accessible to modern readers. If you bounce off one translation, try another. The Eknatheswaran version is often recommended for beginners because it is clear and practical. The Stephen Mitchell version is beautiful and literary. Pick one that speaks to you. Here is what the Bhagavad Gita offers that a lot of philosophy does not. It gives you a framework for living inside the tension of being a spiritual being in a material world with actual responsibilities. It does not say renounce everything and go sit in a cave. It says, show up, do your work, care deeply, but hold it all lightly. That balance is what most people are actually looking for. Not escape, not detachment from everything, but a way to engage fully without being destroyed by it. That is what Krishna teaches Arjuna, and if you read it honestly, it will ask the same questions of you that it asked of him. Tomorrow I will distill the Gita into one 60-second practice. This video was created by combining human research and script writing with AI-assisted visuals and production. Links to translations, related books and resources are below.